What is FHE?
So it's basically, it's a way to do computations on things without having to decrypt it. It's a mouthful. I'm trying to push this, like, we should just do full homo. I think it's kind of funny, it's easier. People are always, it's a word jumble. Fully homomorphic encryption. My name's Kyle. I'm one of the Devrels for Fhenix.
How did you get into Web3?
Yeah, so I used to work in finance, like quantitative trading kind of stuff. And then I came to this conclusion, or like my own conclusion, the financial system is kind of weird. It wasn't really something I wanted to be a part of. So I looked into Bitcoin and I was like, oh, the underlying technology is pretty cool. I think that was maybe in 2017. Ever since then, I've been focusing on understanding how the technology works.
After Bitcoin, did you get into Ethereum?
Yeah, in 2017, like the Ether Delta trading frenzy, kind of, that was my first foray into, I guess, like trading shit coins or whatever. And I guess just kind of Ethereum made more sense. It's just easier to work with. From a high level, it was described to me as more expressive blockchain. I've mostly been in the Ethereum ecosystem. For me, I'm mostly kind of interested in the technology. I just think, like Ethereum's a good place. I think it has, as far as I can tell, like the strongest like dev community.
What do you think Ethereum is lacking in terms of onboarding new people in this space?
I actually, contrary to popular belief, I think the space is growing pretty well. I think it's just, things just take time and it's growing naturally. So it's exciting to see.
Yeah. How did you get into Fhenix?
Yeah, so I think privacy is a sexy term. Everyone's interested in privacy to some degree. Fhenix is working on building like FHE L2, fully homomorphic encryption. But general co-processing also is a big product. So it's like, basically private compute. It's different from mainstream privacy approaches like ZK. I think FHE is kind of like a very different approach. I would argue in some aspects it's more expressive. Security-wise, that's up for debate. But yeah, that's from a high level kind of what Fhenix is building. Before working at Fhenix, I was working on my own chain gaming operating system. I basically wanted to build part of this like engine out that required like a combat engine basically, but it required like asynchronous inputs for synchronous state advancement. That's a fancy way of saying like rock, paper, scissors. If you don't encrypt it or keep it private, I'm going to know you did rock, so I'm just going to do paper and take the money. So I was like, there has to be some form of way to encrypt this on chain, keep it private. I went to the Ethereum Foundation and was like, hey, how would I do this? Because at that time I was thinking ZK is probably the way to do this, just because Vitalik says it. That's the mainstream narrative. These projects are getting funding. People were hyped about. I think this was right after the first ZK EVMs came out. I basically went there, asked them for some advice. They gave me some documentation. I tried some stuff. We had some back and forth with, I think it was some of the researchers from PSE. And I think it kind of boiled down to using a commit reveal scheme. I was like, that's not great UX. It doesn't really scale. There's other issues with it. And so I was like, there has to be kind of a better method. And this is right before New York last year. I stumbled across fully homomorphic encryption. I built something during a hackathon for ETH SF. I built like kind of an on-chain mafia game using fully homomorphic encryption, kind of like where you try to guess who's who without revealing who's who. The CEO of Fhenix reached out to me and we had a few talks. At the time I was working on like some gaming stuff. So we were sort of talking about like how it could be integrated into Fhenix at the early stages. I was really interested in fully homomorphic encryption. It was crazy to me because I was like, I'm surprised people aren't talking about it. Like at the time, I actually think that might have been one of the first fully homomorphic encrypted projects submitted to ETH Global. And I just thought it was really underexplored, kind of undervalued. I don't know why people are so obsessed with these other privacy methods like TEs or MPC or ZK, when from certain perspectives, I think FHE is like ideal. And then I was looking to another project where I was thinking like, hey, why don't we take these FHE Rust operations that was being built by this company called Zama. I was kind of like thinking like, hey, what if we like imported these as stateful precompiles into Arbitrum through Stylus using their WASM VM. I was exploring that, floating the idea in my head, trying to do some research to how it could be built out. Because I was like, why not bring FHE to an L2, right? Then Fhenix released their initial white paper. This is before I was working there, and I was reading through it, and I was like, they were doing some things that were pretty similar to what I was thinking in my head, but way better, way further ahead. I could tell we had a similar idea, but their team like had actually was like multiple steps ahead of where I was thinking. These guys are kind of thinking of what I was thinking, like in parallel. I was like, maybe I would vibe here and then, talk to Guy a little bit more about potentially working at Fhenix. He asked me if I wanted to come work there as a Devrel. And I think I was a little bit skeptical about FHE at first. FHE is slow. So I was like, is the hardware acceleration going to be there? Am I going to spend my 20s grinding on something that might not be computationally feasible for a long time or whatever? And, our CEO was working, I think before this, he worked at like Intel for like their like privacy stuff. mostly on like the SGX, but also some FHE. He was telling me about these government programs like deprive FHE hardware acceleration. And then for me, you're telling me the United States Defense Department is actually investing in FHE hardware acceleration. To me, it almost seems inevitable. One way or the other, this will get figured out. Why would the government be so obsessed in building out this privacy hardware infrastructure? But when I think about it, from my understanding, I'm not a cryptographer, but FHE is built using these FHE schemes that are lattice-based. So instead of usually defending your encryption via large prime number factorizations, it's based off of a different hard problem, sort of like finding the shortest vector to the origin and scales with dimensions. I don't fully get it. Basically, that was enough for me to see, okay, I can actually see the pieces here. I could see why the governments would be interested in like something that's theoretically like quantum proof in case there's like a secret quantum computing lab and I don't know, arbitrary country, whatever, I don't know. But I could see it. And once that kind of clicked for me, I was like, okay, I think these guys are working on something similar. They're thinking it better. Now I'm bullish on FHE, so I'm like, I'll try it, I'll send it. It's my first actual corporate job in Web3. That's basically how I got into Fhenix.
This is a crazy story for me. Sorry, but I don't know anything about
encryption.
What is FHE?
So it's basically, it's a way to do computations on things without having to decrypt it. Because usually when people say end-to-end encryption, like an iPhone user or something, there's these stories of people getting their nudes leaked, for example. Because maybe you encrypt it locally on your phone and then it's encrypted in transit when you're sending it from your phone to Apple's server. But then once the server gets it, they decrypt it so that they can add it to their database. And if you need to query it later, you can do stuff with it. But fully homomorphic encryption keeps it private the whole way through, even if the database gets hacked, as long as they don't get the key. So basically it's a form of like end-to-end encryption. But I kind of hate that term because I feel like it's become saturated just because like it's used so much. It's like global warming or something. It's used too much that it kind of loses its meaning to some degree. I think that fully homomorphic encryption is basically from a high level the ability to do things with a hashed encrypted value without having to decrypt it. Because usually if you have two numbers that are both private, you have to decrypt it and then add them and then you can re-encrypt it. But then whoever's doing that actual math, whether it's like in ZK could be like a prover for proof generation or a server in the legacy world, it's going to get decrypted and then those numbers are going to get added and someone's going to see it. So basically fully homomorphic encryption is a way to do this securely.
Amazing. What do you think will be the path, the journey of this technology? How do you see that adoption?
I think it'll come in a lot of different ways. There will probably be some B2B stuff that's more corporate and behind the scenes. At least for me, I like to think of it as we shouldn't be pushing privacy as the product. There should just be a product. And in the background, people would be using this type of encryption. Instead of making people use something else, just go to where they are and make it so they don't even know they're using it is ideally the way I think it will hopefully work in the future. I think probably initially it'll probably be some form of like private applications that, probably is first adopted by privacy nerds already familiar with the Web3 space. I think it'll slowly break into the mainstream over time. It's not just us working on it. Now you have the larger tech companies starting to adopt it. Microsoft has their own library and Google's creating, I believe, like some sort of Swift extension or some sort of Swift library. There's a lot of work being done in machine learning. Blockchains make sense as a first initial product market fit or initial adoption just because computational overhead is theoretically more feasible than some other larger ambitious goals. Personally, I think private finance is one of those things that FHE is a great application for. Even if you look in the industry right now, a lot of things that are listed as private are mostly just private execution. I mean, there's sort of a time lock, the state itself is in private, which I think leads to to me, that's almost not useless because people will say MEV or execution or fair price execution or whatever. I'm not saying that's not valid. For me, that doesn't super move the needle. I would like to see the whole thing end to end, the state of the application, the view function should be obfuscated with differential privacy caveats in mind, etc. I think that there could theoretically be a lot of financial potential there. I would like to see some sort of private dating or OnlyFans or seeking arrangements using an FHE sealed auction for sugar baby prices or what you get for how much you pay, or matching people based off different dating criteria that maybe they don't want public, like areola diameter.
Do you have anything you want to say or add to the chat?
I think if anyone's interested in getting more involved in working in Web3, it's it's just a cool lifestyle. People are pretty chill. Even at ETH Rome, all these hackathons, these events are sick. You meet people from other parts of the world, hang out and have conversations. It's a cool life. I would try to get more people into this space.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.